Regulators in the U.S., the NHTSA, the National Highway Transport Safety Association, stepping up the pressure on Toyota. NHTSA now seeking records, demanding records, I should say, on whether the car maker conducted its recall in a timely fashion or not. So they're really sticking it to them and watching the process. Doron Levin in Motown joins us for more on a Tuesday afternoon. Doron, first of all, what is this all about? The quality committee Toyota is about to appoint, and yet they're pulling the guns on them, and they're under the microscope, aren't they?
Well, this is part of a big corporate effort on Toyota's part to convince its public that it really cares about quality as much as it has in the past, and it's been undone somewhat by these defects and the lack of answers that it's had for the public. And so now it's going to appoint a quality committee. This is right from Akio Toyoda, the chief executive officer, who really wants to put a task force out there to re-examine Toyota's methods and its practices and find out what it can change so that it never falls into a mess like this again.
What's on the docket for the meet next week? Is it going to be a vitriol, a lot of missiles lobbed at the company, and there's presumably going to be a certain dose of politics in there too?
I suspect there'll be a lot of grandstanding. The two main characters from the Congress are Bart Stupak, who is a congressman from the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, and he's obviously going to be very pro Big Three and very pro domestic auto industry. Then there's Henry Waxman, who's the chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, who comes actually from Los Angeles and Beverly Hills. So a lot of his constituents drive Priuses, and a lot of them drive Toyotas. And so he'll have to be very careful how he treats whoever does show up from Toyota. And of course, that's another big mystery. Who is going to show up from Toyota? Is Akio Toyoda going to show up, or is it going to be their top U.S. people?
Yeah, well, Doron, Akio Toyoda is going to have a press conference later on today in Tokyo, so we'll see what he has to say. But let me just ask you about this recall in the U.S., because it has now moved to these lighter pickup trucks. Tacoma's now involved. What's the latest on these?
Well, first of all, the one thing that people may not appreciate is that there are scores, maybe even hundreds of recalls every year. There's been something like 500 in the last 2 years covering 20 million cars. So this is almost an everyday event. It's focused on Toyota all of a sudden for a bunch of different reasons, and partly because Toyota was never as much of a subject of recalls, at least as big a recall, as they've been subject to in the last couple of months. And so every new one, obviously, is more ammunition, more fodder for their critics. But I would say that I've just come back from the dealers convention in Orlando, and many of the people that I interviewed there, the car dealers, especially Toyota dealers, show a high degree of confidence that Toyota is going to bounce back from this and believe that the company is going to find an answer, a way to answer its critics, and a way to restore confidence.
Yeah, that's the naming of that light pickup that put our small, tiny little dot of a city on the map years ago. Amazing. 20 million cars recalled over in 500 actions. What's wrong with the industry? Has it improved, or is it business as usual, Doron?
Well, when you're producing 16, 15, 14 million vehicles a year, there can be defects, anything from a piece of material that isn't quite big enough for the back seat to something critical like Toyota found in its gas pedal. So these are vehicles that have 15,000 parts, and as somebody pointed out, you know, your computer crashes all the time, your cell phone drops calls all the time, but when a car breaks, it can be something that has a real safety implication. And so the regulators are all over this stuff, and the engineers are really trying to document it as hard as they can to find out exactly what's causing it and exactly how to fix it so that nobody's life is put in danger.
Yeah, it's just too many moving parts. You mentioned the Orlando Dealers Conference there. What is it? Rationalization? Is it shrinkage? Or what, Doron?
Well, you have thousands of dealers that were taken out as a result of the bankruptcies of General Motors and Chrysler, and then the restructuring. And then subsequently there was a congressional bill that basically restores their right to go into arbitration. So right now both car companies, General Motors and Chrysler, are in the midst of trying to figure out which of these thousands of dealers they're going to be able to keep, and that'll really be up to subject to negotiations and subject to arbitration. But it's kind of an event that's going to really slow them down in terms of their restructuring. What everybody really wants to happen is to see a year in 2010 in which the number of cars sold is significantly more than the one last year. You had something like 10.8 million cars and trucks sold in the U.S. in 2009, which is about 1/3 off from what had been the run rate for several years before that. And what they're hoping is that maybe they'll get up from 10.8 million to 11.5, maybe even 12 million this year, and that's going to make the dealers really happy if they're able to do that.
Okay, thanks, Doron. Doron, of course, in Detroit,
Sure.
the original Motown.